Maya was running as fast as she reasonably could through the thick jungle growth. She was constantly pushing large leaves bigger than her whole head out of her way, while attempting to avoid tripping over the large limbs and roots that lay across the ground. She had already tripped on some roots earlier, causing her to feel a sharp pain in her left arm. She could feel something wet running down her forearm before dripping off her fingers. Blood, she thought. My blood. Taking a second to examine her arm, she saw a large laceration on her forearm that was oozing blood. Damn it, she swore. Realizing the danger, she quickly reached up to the shoulder of her shirt, tearing off a large strip. As quickly as possible, she wrapped the strip of cloth tightly over her wound. Sitting there, she thought back to just a few minutes ago when she had gotten the wound. She had been stumbling through the jungle of the island in almost complete darkness after losing her flashlight earlier that night. Eventually, after tripping over every damn root in the jungle, she reached the small clearing. Standing in the darkness, she took a few moments to catch her breath. As she stood there, she suddenly heard a rustle from the plants behind her. Fearing the worst and not wanting to risk tripping over any more logs, she reached to her belt and pulled out another road flare. Hesitating for just a moment, she took the cap off and lit the flare, which illuminated the immediate area with a vibrant, bright red light. Looking in the direction she heard the rustling, she didn't see anything, until she suddenly saw two bright white orbs hidden in the undergrowth. Eyes, she realized. Those are eyes. Turning to continue running, she suddenly felt a strong pressure and weight pulling on her left arm, soon followed by a sharp, searing pain. Acting quickly, she took the flare and stabbed the burning end into whatever had seemingly bit her. As she did so, she felt the pressure be released upon her arm, but felt even more pain than before as it let go. Blinking away the tears caused by the pain, she tried to get a glimpse of her attacker. All she saw was a flash of white, followed by a hissing sound. She heard the sound echo from different locations around her. Jerking her head around in a panic, Maya saw several more sets of wide eyes staring at her from the undergrowth. Quickly, she began running and continued running until she arrived here. Finished bandaging her arm, she picked up her flare off the ground and checked her surroundings. No creepy glowing eyes this time, she muttered with a little relief. Taking the time to bandage her arm allowed her mind to shake off the panic and begin to think. She knew she couldn't keep running all night, as she was already growing tired and weak from the blood loss. She needed a safe place to hide, somewhere nothing could reach her, or hide nearby to ambush her later. Thinking, she looked up and saw a large, dark shape that towered above her. Tree, she thought, would be perfect. Running to the base of the tree, she saw it was huge, going up so high that her measly light couldn't even see the lowest branches. The trunk itself was almost wide enough to fit a jeep through it. As she began her preparations to climb the tree, she noticed her flare begin to rapidly sputter before going out again, plunging Maya into complete darkness. Not wanting to risk being attacked again or climbing this tree in total darkness, she pulled out her last flare and began to strike it, but the flare refused to light. Becoming more and more frantic, she continued striking the flare, knowing it was her only hope. Thankfully, the flare sprang to life, slightly blinding her with how bright it was. She then looked up and almost jumped out of her own skin, as standing before her was a dinosaur. As it recoiled from the light, she saw that it was covered in a grayish-blue plumage and was very small. Only about 1 to 2 feet tall and maybe 4 feet long. It didn't seem very threatening at first glance. However, she knew how dangerous this dinosaur was, as its eyes were large, white orbs. Their eyes are similar to cat eyes, giving them superb night vision, but they were clearly sensitive to bright light. As the small dinosaur in front of her reeled back from the light of the flare, of its eyes scrunched shut. She looked around and suddenly felt her breath quicken. adrenaline pumping its way through her body. She realized her flare is all that had been warning them off, as all around her were sets of bright white eyes. Utilizing the strength the adrenaline gave her, Maya began to climb the tree as quickly as she could. Sadly, she had to leave the flare on the ground, since she couldn't climb without both her hands free. Thankfully, it did a good job of covering her escape. She climbed her way up into the darkness, knowing that it was safer up here than down below. Eventually, she found a nice nook in the tree that she could rest in. Collapsing, she quickly began to fall asleep, with the last thing she heard being a hiss from the darkness below.